My son told me I should stop worrying about money just hours after I discovered he'd emptied my savings behind my back. 2 days later, he was standing in my kitchen screaming about a declined card, and he had no idea I was the one who cut him off. He thought age made me powerless, confused, easy to control, but he didn't know I'd spent those 3 days planning the moment his whole world would shift. Before I go on, I just want to thank you for listening to an old man's story. If you'd like to hear more of the lessons life has carved into me, I'd be grateful if you'd subscribe and maybe tell me where you're listening from. Your support means more than you know. I've lived in this old Milwaukee house for nearly 50 years. It cacks in the winter, sighs in the summer, and holds more memories than I can count. Most mornings start the same. A slow stretch, a hand on the edge of the nightstand, a quiet breath before my feet touch the floor. I'm 74 now, and some days I move like a man carrying yesterday on his back, but I still make my own coffee, still crack open the window just enough to let the morning air in, still talk to my late wife Linda as if she's sitting right there at the table. "Just another day, sweetheart," I whisper. It comforts me more than I admit. Life used to feel simple, slow, predictable in the best way. I kept the yard trimmed, read the newspaper front to back, fixed whatever broke with the same tools I've had since my 20s. And then after Linda passed, the silence closed in on me. Not peaceful silence, but the kind that presses on your chest until breathing feels like work. So when my son Mark called that November afternoon, voice shaking, saying he and his wife Brianna had been evicted and just needed a place for a couple of months, I didn't think twice. I told them to come home. "Family sticks together," I said. I believed it. The first few weeks almost felt healing. Mark helped me clear leaves from the gutter. Brianna cooked those big weekend breakfasts that fill the whole house with warmth. The guest room felt lived in again. The living room didn't echo anymore. For a man who'd been eating alone for months, that meant more than I can explain. I thought maybe God was giving me one more chance at family, something to hold on to in the quiet hours. They told me they wanted to take care of me. Said I'd worked too hard for too long. Said I needed to rest. And I believed them because it felt good to believe them. Mark would pat my shoulder and say, "Dad, let us handle the bills. You shouldn't stress at your age." Brianna would tuck my mail into neat piles, smiling like she was doing me a favor. I didn't realize I was handing over pieces of my independence, one small gesture at a time. Back then, I was just grateful not to eat dinner alone, grateful to hear voices in the halls, grateful for footsteps on the stairs at night. People always know when your heart is soft, especially the ones who grew up inside it. I remember one evening sitting with Mark on the porch. Cool night jacket, weather, streetlights humming like they did when he was little. He talked about wanting to build a future, about needing a little help to get there. And I listened. I always listened. I told him I'd support him however I could. I worked double shifts for years, so he never went without. That kind of sacrifice becomes instinct when you're a parent. So when he asked if he could temporarily help manage my accounts just to keep things organized, "Dad, you're juggling too much." I agreed. It felt like trust, like connection, like family doing what family is supposed to do. I didn't notice the small shifts at first. My debit card missing from the drawer, then found in the laundry. A bill that looked higher than usual but was quickly explained away. A bank statement that somehow never arrived. Little things easy to shrug off when you want to believe the best. Hard to question when the alternative feels like betrayal. The house was full again. And I held on to that warmth, thinking it would last, thinking it meant something. But now looking back at that man on the porch, listening to a son he trusted, I almost want to warn him because the peace he felt, the kind he clung to so desperately, was about to end. And when it ended all at once. I didn't know it then, but that quiet porch night was the last real peace I'd feel for a long, long time. It happened on a Wednesday. Funny how life doesn't pause before it breaks you. Trouble doesn't make an announcement. It just walks in, like it owns the place. I'd gone to the bank that morning. Slow, steady steps along the sidewalk, past the bakery and the old fire station. I wanted to withdraw $60, just $60, enough for groceries and a small gift for my granddaughter Chloe. I hadn't seen her in years, not because she didn't want to visit, but because Brianna always said it wasn't a good time, and Mark nodded along like a man who no longer had thoughts of his own. I missed that girl. Missed the way she leaned her head on my shoulder. Missed hearing her laugh fill a room. I slid my card into the ATM, waited, listened to the hum I'd heard 1,000 times. Then the screen flashed. Insufficient funds. I frowned, tried again. Same message. The kind of message that punches deeper the second time. My stomach sank, a slow, heavy drop like something falling through water. I walked inside and asked for Maria. Kind woman, warm smile, known me for years. She sat me down, pulled up my account, and I watched the color drain from her face. "Mr. Grant," she whispered, turning the monitor toward me. "Did you authorize these withdrawals?" The screen looked like a BA. Tettlefield, $4,800. Sedona Resort, $2,300. Men's Luxury Tailoring, $1,700. Electronics Superstore, $620. Spa Package, $9,200. Not then, not yet. But something in me, something old and tired, shifted. A quiet break. A silent crack through the middle of everything I believed. I walked home slowly. The air felt heavier. The world felt distant. When I stepped through the front door, the smell of Brianna's expensive candles hit me. Sandalwood, citrus things I never bought. Things she filled my home with using my money. Mark and Brianna were in the kitchen laughing, eating takeout sushi, the kind that comes in boxes that cost more than a week of groceries. Mark looked up, people I trusted. Brianna's smile faltered. She sensed something, a shift in the air. "I went to the bank," I said quietly. Mark's chopsticks froze midair. "Oh, need cash? We could have taken care of the account," I said. "It's empty." They didn't gasp, didn't show shock, didn't show guilt. They looked irritated, like I'd interrupted something they enjoyed. "Dad." Mark sighed. "We told you we're handling things. You don't need to. I saw the statements." Silence. Not the peaceful kind, the heavy kind. Brianna set down her sushi slowly, too slowly. "That money was being used for the household, Sam, for all of us. You agreed we'd help manage things. I agreed to help," I said. "I didn't agree to be drained dry." Mark slammed his hand on the counter, soy sauce splashing onto the marble. "Robbed? Seriously? After everything we've done for you, you live here for free." "For free?" I laughed once, a hollow, disappointed sound. "This is my house, Mark." His jaw tightened. A flash of something ugly flickered across his face. "Your old dad," he snapped. "You forget things, you lose track. You can't keep up with finances. We were keeping everything organized. By spending $200,000 on yourselves." He didn't answer. Brianna stood up, her voice softer, but poisoned underneath. "You're confused, Sam. We've talked about this. You said you didn't want to worry about money anymore." I stepped back, not in fear, in realization. "I'm not confused," I said, "and I'm not broke because I'm old. I'm broke because you used my trust as a piggy bank." Their faces changed in an instant, masks off, truth exposed. "You should have stayed out of the way," Brianna snapped. Mark jabbed a finger at me. "You gave me access. You let us do this, so don't act like the victim." I didn't raise my voice, didn't shout, but something inside me, the part that had bent and bent until there was nothing left to bend, went still. And in that stillness, one thought rose, clear as day. I will not stay silent. I felt my voice settle, not louder but stronger. And they had no idea what that meant. That night, the house felt different. Not colder, just hollow, a kind of emptiness that doesn't echo. It absorbs, takes everything in, and gives nothing back. I sat on the edge of my bed, shoes still on, jacket still zipped, staring at the floorboards Linda and I picked out decades ago. Back when the house meant laughter, not survival. My hands trembled, but not from age. It was clarity. A clarity that arrived too late to protect me, but just in time to wake me up. Downstairs, I heard footsteps. Slow, restless ones. Mark's voice rising in frustration, Brianna snapping back in sharp whispers. Cabinets opening, drawers slamming, their panic had a cadence of its own. I leaned back against the headboard and closed my eyes. All I could see were memories. Not the bank screen, not the statements, but Mark at 5 years old crying after falling off his bike. Zarn Mark at 12 sleeping in the hallway during storms. Mark at 20 standing in the doorway after a fight, eyes red, whispering, "Dad, I'm sorry." Those versions of him felt like ghosts now, distant, untouchable. It wasn't anger washing through me. Not yet. It was grief. A grief that felt older than I was. Rain began tapping at the window, soft at first, then steadier, like the world was trying to drown out the mess inside the house. I finally unzipped my jacket and set it over the chair. As it folded, I noticed a tear near the cuff. Small, barely visible, but somehow it hurt more than the numbers on the bank screen. It reminded me of something Linda once said. Little tears come from big wear. She wasn't talking about fabric. I see that now. I walked into the bathroom and splashed cold water on my face. When I looked up, the man in the mirror didn't look broken. He looked finished. Finished pretending he didn't see what he saw. Finished hoping for people who weren't hoping for him. Downstairs, something shattered. A plate maybe a glass. I didn't flinch, didn't rush, didn't worry. I just stood there, hands on the sink, and let the sound settle around me like dust. I walked slowly back to the bed and sat upright, blanket over my legs, hands folded, breathing steady, thinking not anxiously, not emotionally, just thinking. I remembered Maria at the bank, her gentle voice saying, "Mr. Grant, you didn't imagine this." I remembered Linda's advice that I'd ignored too many times. If something feels wrong, trust that feeling. And then I remembered Chloe, my granddaughter, who had been pushed away from me by lies. The phone was on the dresser. Old flip model, scratched, stubborn, but it worked when it needed to. I opened it. Chloe's name sat there in the contacts, third on the list where it had always been. My thumb hovered, not from hesitation, but from the weight of the moment. I pressed call. She answered on the second ring. "Grandpa." Her voice cracked just a little, enough to remind me what love actually sounds like. "Chloe," I whispered, "I need help." There was silence, but the kind tea. Hat holds breath, not judgment. "What did they do?" she asked softly. Everything in me trembled, my throat tightened. "Everything," I said. "They took everything." She inhaled sharply, not out of shock, out of anger for me. "I'm coming," she said. "Don't do anything alone." When the call ended, I sat there in the quiet, phone still in my hand. The rain had stopped. The house was still. But for the first time since stepping into that bank, I wasn't afraid. I felt something steadier, something I hadn't felt in years. Resolve. It didn't jump, it didn't roar. It grew slowly like a small flame catching on dry wood. I looked at the door, at the shadows under it, at the light flickering from the hallway. And I whispered to myself, "It's time to think very carefully." Some nights I caught myself whispering their names, not in anger but in disbelief. I didn't sleep that night, not because I was scared, but because my mind was finally awake. There's a strange clarity that comes after deep betrayal. The fog lifts, noise fades, and every decision that once felt impossible starts lining up quietly, waiting to be made. By sunrise, I already knew something had changed inside me. Not anger, not spite, just a calm, deliberate resolve, the kind that comes when a man realizes he's all out of chances to give. I slipped into the guest room and found my old jacket hanging behind the door. The same one Linda always teased me about, said it made me look like a man who still believed in himself. I put it on, and for the first time in years, it felt true. Downstairs, Mark and Brianna were passed out on the sofa. Empty takeout containers, wine glasses, and shopping, bags littered around them like some kind of shrine to entitlement. Mark's fingers were still curled around the neck of a half-empty bottle he definitely didn't pay for. I stood there for a moment watching him sleep. He looked younger, like that, almost innocent, almost like the kid who used to fall asleep on my chest after a long day in the backyard. But innocence doesn't survive greed, and whatever part of him was still that child had been buried under years of taking more than life ever owed him. I stepped past them quietly, careful not to wake anyone. Not because I feared them, but because I wasn't ready for them to know I wasn't confused anymore. Outside, the cold air hit my face like a reminder. "You're still here. You still have choices. I walked to the small cafe on the corner, ordered a black coffee, sat in the same booth Linda and I used to share on Sunday mornings. Then I pulled out my phone and dialed Chloe. She answered in less than 2 rings. "Grandpa, did something else happen?" Her voice was steady, concerned, but ready. "I'm okay," I said, "but I need you to come." She didn't hesitate. "Not for a second. I'm booking the next flight. 6 hours. Don't talk to them alone. Don't confront them alone. Just stay safe until I get there." A breath left my chest, slow and aching, the kind that feels like letting go of something heavy. "Thank you, sweetheart." "No," she said softly. "Thank you for calling." When the call ended, I sat there for a long moment with my coffee cooling in front of me, not thinking about what I'd lost, but what I could still protect. I paid the check and walked to the public library, the one place Mark and Brianna would never think to follow me. The librarian smiled when she saw me. Old Mr. Grant, the newspaper man. I nodded back and headed straight for the computers. I logged in and pulled up the account Mark thought I was too forgetful to access, and then I started printing one page, then another and another. Transaction histories, access logs, withdrawals with his signature, purchases that made no sense for a man living on a pension, evidence, all of it. When the stack reached nearly an inch thick, I slid every page carefully into a manila envelope, like a man assembling his life back together piece by piece. And my hands, the same hands that shook at the ATM, were steady now, steadier than they had been in years. On the walk home, I stopped at an old payphone booth, one of those relics with chipped paint that somehow still works. I dialed the number to my bank branch and asked for Harris, the manager who'd known Linda and me for nearly 3 decades. "Harris," I said quietly, "I need to open a new account, completely separate, completely private." There was a pause on the line, a long one. "Mr. Grant, is everything okay?" "No," I said, "but it will be," his voice lowered, compassion without pity. "Come by this afternoon, I'll prepare everything." When I walked back into the house, Mark and Brianna were standing in the living room, arms crossed, faces tight. "Where did you go?" Brianna demanded. "I hung my jacket on the hook." "For a walk." "You didn't tell us," she snapped. I turned to her, my voice calm. "Didn't know I needed permission." Mark's jaw clenched. "Dad, we need to talk about the bank." "No," I said, and the word landed like a stone. Both of them froze. "I don't need to talk." I stepped past them toward the stairs. "You do." Upstairs, I pushed the dresser against my door again, sat at my desk, spread out the printed statements, like a map of everything I had ignored for too long. Then I called Chloe one more time. "I'm safe," I said. "And I'm ready for what? For this to end." When I hung up, a calm washed through me, colder than anger, stronger than fear. The kind of calm a man feels when the last piece finally clicks into place inside him. I looked at the papers on my desk, at the life they represented, at the abuse they exposed, and I whispered more to myself than anyone. My son drained my savings and called it helping. Now it's time he learns what NCE can do. They had no idea that silence was already building the walls they wouldn't be able to climb. The morning Chloe arrived, the sky was quiet. That pale, empty gray lake view gets before a storm. I stood at the front window, watching her taxi roll to a stop. She stepped out with her suitcase in one hand and a folder tucked under her arm like it contained the truth itself. When she saw me open the door, her face softened, not with pity, but with love, a kind I hadn't felt directed at me in a long, long time. "Grandpa?" she whispered, and the way she said it made the whole house feel different. She hugged me tightly, steadying me with her arms like she'd prepared for this moment. I didn't realize how much strength I'd lost, not from age, but from carrying fear alone. Behind her, a black sedan pulled into the driveway. A man in a charcoal suit stepped out, sharp eyes, steady posture, professional enough to silence a room without speaking. "Attorney Walsh," Chloe said quietly, "the senior partner at my firm." I nodded. I didn't need introductions. His presence told me everything. This wasn't going to be a family talk. This was going to be justice. We walked into the house and I could feel Mark and Brianna's tension before I saw them. They were sitting at the kitchen table, coffee mugs untouched, eyes wide, guilt written across their posture. Mark stood abruptly when he saw the officer behind Walsh. "Dad, what is this?" His voice cracked on the last word. I didn't respond. Didn't need to. Walsh placed the folder on the table with a soft thud, a sound gentler than the weight it carried. "Mr. and Mrs. Sterling," he began. "I am representing Mr. Thomas Grant. This household is now under immediate legal review for financial exploitation and elder abuse." Brianna's face drained of color. What? No, we were helping him. He's been confused. He doesn't remember things. Walsh Ned, the folder slowly, page by page. Bank statements, forged signatures, ATM withdrawals, luxury purchases made in my name. The truth spread across the table like broken glass. Mark pointed weakly at the papers. "That's not Dad didn't understand." He agreed. Chloe stepped forward, voiced like ice. "He didn't. I have the call logs. I have his medical evaluations. I've spoken to the bank manager. I have the records of the transfers you tried to hide. And I have a sworn affidavit that my grandfather was intentionally isolated and pressured into signing away control of his own finances." The officer moved closer, not threatening, just present. Brianna shook her head rapidly, hands trembling. "We took care of him. We gave up our time, our lives." Walsh's reply was measured. "Cool. You lived in his home rent-free. You spent his retirement on your vacations, your shopping, your luxuries. You applied for credit in his name. You attempted a second mortgage without his consent." Mark's voice cracked. "We needed the money, and he needed respect," Chloe snapped. Silence filled the kitchen, heavy, unavoidable. The officer finally spoke. "Mr. and Mrs. Sterling, you are required to vacate this residence immediately. A temporary restraining order is in effect. You may take personal items only." Mark's bravado shattered. He slumped into the chair, face pale, breathing hard like a man realizing the ground beneath him is gone. "Dad, please," he whispered. "I'm your son." I met his eyes, and for a moment, just one, I saw the boy he used to be. But a boy who grows into a man who steals from his father is not lost. He is dangerous. "I know," I said softly, and the softness cut more deeply than anger ever could, "but I'm done being hurt in my own home." He covered his face with both hands. No fight left, only collapse. Brianna grabbed a duffel bag and began stuffing clothes into it. Her hands shook so violently that a sweater slipped from her grip twice. When they reached the door, Brianna spun around, voice brittle and sharp. "You'll die alone, Thomas. Don't expect anyone to care." I didn't raise my voice, didn't tremble, didn't blink. I'd rather die alone in peace than live with the kind of people who stole my dignity. The door closed behind them with a hollow thud, the same sound a coffin lid makes in old movies. The officer nodded respectfully and left. Walsh gathered his documents and shook my hand. "You did the right thing," he said, not triumphantly, but with a quiet reverence. Chloe stayed behind. We stood in the kitchen, the same kitchen they had turned into a battleground, and suddenly it felt warm again. She placed her hand on my shoulder. "It's over, Grandpa." But she was wrong. It wasn't over. Not yet. I looked at the empty hallway, the doorway where Mark had once run, and excited just to show me a school project. And I felt something settle inside me, a calm deeper than grief, deeper than anger, a peace that comes only after choosing yourself. And in that silence, I finally felt free. Spring came slowly to Lakeview, the kind of spring that doesn't rush, it unfolds. Soft rain first, then shy sunlight on the porch, then the quiet courage of new leaves pushing through cold soil. I spent my mornings out back, kneeling in the garden, pressing bulbs into the dirt with hands that finally felt steady again. No footsteps behind me, no whispers, no fear creeping in the corners of my mind. For the first time in a long while, the house breathed with me, not against me. Chloe visited every few days. We'd drink tea on the porch, her asking questions about the past I'd almost forgotten to remember. stories she had been kept from, not because of distance, but because of the lies others had wrapped around both of us. One afternoon, as she read through some final legal papers, she oaked up at me and said, "You know, Grandpa, what they did never defined you, but what you chose to do, that does." I didn't answer right away. Wisdom takes a moment to settle. Truth is, I had spent years thinking endurance was love, thinking patience was loyalty, thinking sacrifice was the price of family. But I learned something in that storm, something I wish I'd learned earlier. Respect isn't owed because of blood. Trust isn't guaranteed because of shared history. And love should never require you to disappear. The day I told myself my son drained my savings and called it helping, but I refused to live small for anyone, something shifted inside me that will never shift back. Now I wake up without waiting for footsteps in the hallway. I make coffee without bracing for someone to criticize it. I sleep without checking the lock twice. Peace feels different in old age. It feels earned. And when I walk through this house, this home Linda and I built nail by nail, brick by brick, I don't feel abandoned. I feel returned to myself, returned to the life I almost lost. Maybe that's the quiet miracle of all this. You can bloom again, even after a long winter. You just have to choose yourself first. Respect, once lost, can be reclaimed if you wait for the right moment and find the strength to stand in your own truth again. If this story meant something to you, tell me in the comments what part stayed with you. And if you'd like to hear more from me, because sometimes silence isn't weakness, it's justice wrapped in grace. Silent revenge.